Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. Kneel. The command wasn't shouted. It was whispered, yet it sliced through the roaring cacophony of the victory banquet like a razor wire drawn across a throat. General Calen Thorne, known across the Seven Kingdoms as the Obsidian Wolf, did not kneel. Not when the shackles bit into his raw, bleeding wrists. Not when the guards kicked the back of his knees. He stood amidst the spilled wine and crushed flowers of the enemy's great hall, his dark hair matted with the dust of defeat, his golden eyes burning with a hatred hot enough to melt the very steel that bound him. He looked up at the dais, at the creature of frost and silk who had orchestrated the fall of his nation. Crown Prince Valerius of the Northern Frostlands sat upon his throne of carved glacial glass, legs crossed with an elegance that belied the lethal power humming beneath his skin. He was beautiful in the way an avalanche is beautiful, pale, destructive, and utterly cold. He swirled a goblet of dark red wine, his silver eyelashes lowering as he regarded the defiant general. I said. Valerius murmured, rising slowly, the heavy brocade of his silver robes flowing like liquid moonlight. Kneel. The pressure in the room shifted. It wasn't physical force, it was the crushing weight of Valerius's aura, a magical dominance that made the air thin and cold. Calen's breath hitched. His body, battered from 3 days of siege and combat, betrayed him. His knees hit the marble floor with a sickening crack, not out of submission, but because the gravity around him had seemingly doubled. A gasp went through the court. The wolf had been broken. Valerius descended the stairs, the sound of his boots echoing in the terrified silence. He stopped before Calen, tilting the prisoner's chin up with the tip of a black, leather-gloved finger. "They call you a god of war," Valerius said softly, his voice a caress that promised pain. "But to me, you look like nothing more than a lost dog looking for a master." Calen spat blood onto the prince's pristine white boot. "I would rather be a corpse than your pet, Ice Leech." The court held its breath. Execution was certain. Instead, a slow, terrifying smile spread across Valerius's lips. He didn't wipe the blood away. "A corpse is boring, Calen. A corpse cannot scream. And I have so much I wish to discuss with you." He turned to his guards, his cape swirling. "Take him to the Onyx Tower. Wash him. Heal him. If he dies, every single one of you will follow him." Calen struggled against the chains as he was hauled away, shouting curses until the heavy oak doors slammed shut. Valerius watched him go, the smile fading into a look of profound, exhausted desperation that no one in the court noticed. The Onyx Tower was less a prison and more a gilded cage suspended over a precipice. The room was opulent, filled with furs and velvet, but the windows were sealed with magical wards that hummed with lethal frost magic. For 3 weeks, Calen saw no one but silent servants who brought him rich meals he refused to eat and healers who tended to his wounds with trembling hands. His strength returned, and with it, his rage. He paced the room like a caged tiger, testing every stone, every ward. There was no escape. The magic of the Frostlands was ancient and suffocating. On the 22nd night, the door opened. Valerius entered alone. He wasn't wearing his royal armor or the heavy ceremonial robes. He wore a simple tunic of loose white silk, his silver hair unbound and cascading down his back. He looked smaller, almost fragile, devoid of the terrifying aura he projected in the throne room. Calen was across the room in a heartbeat, grabbing Valerius by the throat and slamming him against the stone wall. The prince didn't fight back. He didn't even use his magic. He just looked at Calen with those unnerving, crystalline eyes. "Do it," Valerius rasped, his hands hanging limply at his sides. "Snap it. Be the hero." Calen's grip tightened. He could feel the pulse fluttering beneath the prince's pale skin. It would be so easy. One twist, and the war ended. The tyrant died. But something was wrong. Valerius's skin was burning hot to the touch, despite the freezing temperature of the room. Sweat beaded on the prince's forehead, and his eyes were glazed with pain. "Why aren't you fighting?" Calen growled, confusion warring with his bloodlust. "Because I am dying, wolf," Valerius whispered, his head lolling forward to rest against Calen's hand. "And you are the only one who can stop it." Calen released him, stepping back as if burned. Valerius slid down the wall, gasping for air, clutching his chest. A trick, Cailan accused, though his warrior's instinct told him otherwise. The Frostline, Valerius choked out. The magic that protects this kingdom. It demands a price. It consumes the heat of the ruler until they freeze from the inside out. My father died of it. My brother died of it. Now the ice is in my blood. Good. Cailan sneered, crossing his arms. Freeze. Rot. Why should I care? Valerius looked up, his eyes flashing with a sudden, desperate intensity. Because if I die, the wards protecting the north fail. And if they fail, the shadows of the deep, the creatures your people think are myths, will pour through. They won't stop at the Frostlands, Cailan. They will consume the south. They will eat your home, your sister, your people. Cailan froze. The shadows. The monsters of the bedtime stories. He had seen signs of them on the border. Cattle turned inside out. Darkness that moved against the wind. Why me? Cailan asked, his voice low. Because you are a child of the sun, Valerius said, extending a trembling hand. Your bloodline carries the solar fire of the southern wastes. It is the only thing that can counterbalance the frost in my veins. I don't need your life. I need your warmth. It was a ludicrous, impossible claim. Yet, as Cailan looked at the prince, he saw the truth. Frost was literally creeping up Valerius's neck, turning his skin translucent and blue. The prince was freezing to death in a warm room. You captured me, Cailan said slowly. Humiliated me, destroyed my army. Just to use me as a heater? I captured you because your king, your own brother, sold you to me. Valerius revealed, dropping the bombshell with brutal efficiency. He fears your popularity, Cailan. He knew of my condition. He traded you for a trade route and a peace treaty. You are not a prisoner of war. You are a purchase. The words struck Cailan harder than any physical blow. Sold, betrayed by his own blood. The rage that had sustained him drained away, leaving a hollow, aching void. Valerius let out a sharp cry of pain, curling into a ball on the floor. The frost was spreading to his face now. Cailan stared at him. He should let him die. He should let the north fall. But Cailan was a protector first, a soldier second. And if the shadows were real? With a curse, Cailan dropped to his knees. What do I do? Touch me, Valerius gasped. Skin to skin. Just hold me. Cailan hesitated, then reached out, sliding his rough, calloused hands under the silk of Valerius's tunic, placing them against the prince's bare back. The reaction was instantaneous. Valerius arched his back with a ragged moan, the contact sending a visible shockwave through him. To Cailan, Valerius felt like a statue of ice. To Valerius, Cailan felt like a furnace, a blazing sun in the eternal winter. More, Valerius pleaded, his usual arrogance dissolved into pure need. He clung to Cailan's shoulders, pulling him closer. Please. Cailan wrapped his arms around the slender waist, pulling the prince against his chest. The sensation was overwhelming, a collision of fire and ice that made the air around them sizzle. Valerius buried his face in the crook of Cailan's neck, his breathing sinking with the general's. They stayed like that for hours, the enemies tangled together on the stone floor, bound not by chains, but by a desperate, magical equilibrium. For the first time, Cailan smelled the scent of the prince, not blood and steel, but winter pines and ozone. It was intoxicating. Weeks bled into months. The dynamic in the Onyx Tower shifted. Cailan was no longer locked in. He walked the palace grounds, always shadowed by guards, but free. Yet, every night, Valerius returned to his room. It began as a medical necessity. The transference, as the court physicians called it. But it evolved. It became nights spent talking in the dark. Valerius spoke of the burden of the crown, of a childhood spent in isolation, trained to be a weapon. Cailan spoke of the freedom of the southern deserts, of the brother he had loved who had betrayed him. They were two lonely souls, shaped by violence, finding a strange solace in the enemy's arms. One evening, during a heavy blizzard, Valerius sat by the fire, reading ancient scrolls. Cailan was sharpening a dagger, a gift Valerius had returned to him, a sign of trust. The council is pressuring me, Valerius said, not looking up. To kill me, Cailan asked, testing the blade's edge. To marry, Valerius corrected. Lady Seraphina of the Western Isles. Her dowry would fund the war effort against the encroaching shadows. Kaelin felt a spike of jealousy, so sharp it nearly drew blood. He sheathed the dagger with a loud clack. She cannot survive your touch, Valerius. You will freeze her on the wedding night. Valerius looked up, a sad smile playing on his lips. Perhaps, but a king must produce an heir, and he must secure alliances. I am your alliance, Kaelin growled, standing up. He stalked over to the chair, looming over the prince. My solar affinity is the only thing keeping the ice at bay. You marry her, and you die. Are you worried for my life, General? Valerius teased, though his eyes were dark with unsaid emotion. Or do you just not want to share? Kaelin didn't answer with words. He grabbed the lapels of Valerius's robe and hauled him up, crushing his mouth against the prince's. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision of teeth and tongue, acclaiming. It was the months of hatred, the betrayal, the confusion, and the undeniable magnetic pull finally exploding. Valerius made a noise of surprise that quickly turned into a whimper of surrender. He clawed at Kaelin's back, opening to him, the frost in his veins meeting Kaelin's fire. When they finally broke apart, gasping, Valerius's lips were swollen and red, his eyes blown wide. You are mine, Kaelin whispered against his mouth, the possessiveness terrifying him even as he spoke it. Let the council rot. Let the world burn. You belong to me. Valerius touched Kaelin's face, his fingers cool, but no longer freezing. And you, my wolf? Are you mine? Or will you run back to the brother who sold you? I have no brother, Kaelin swore. I have only you. Peace, however, is a fragile thing in a world built on war. 2 weeks later, the betrayal came. Not from the south, but from within the northern court. The High Chancellor, fearing Valerius's increasing dependence on the southern savage, deactivated the palace wards during the festival of the Frost Moon. He intended to let a small shadow beast in, just enough to cause chaos and frame Kaelin for the negligence. He miscalculated. The sky tore open. The corruption didn't send a beast, it sent a legion. Ink-black horrors with too many limbs and eyes of burning green descended upon the capital. The screams of the civilians shattered the festive air. Kaelin and Valerius were on the balcony when the alarm screamed. The wards. Valerius shouted, his face paling. They're down. Get to the ley line chamber. Kaelin barked, drawing his sword. You have to reset them manually. I can't. Valerius cried, summoning a spear of ice to impale a flying horror that lunged at them. I need time to channel the energy. I'll be defenseless. Then I will be your shield, Kaelin roared. He grabbed Valerius's hand. Run. They fought their way through the corridors. The palace was a slaughterhouse. Guards lay dead, their bodies twisted by the corruption. Kaelin was a whirlwind of steel and fire, his blade moving faster than the eye could follow, hacking through the shadow beasts. Valerius blasted the path clear with waves of frost, but the exertion was taking its toll. The ice was creeping up his neck again. They reached the great doors of the ley line chamber. Go inside. Kaelin shoved Valerius toward the threshold. Seal the door and restart the wards. Kaelin, no. Valerius grabbed his arm. There are too many of them. Come inside with me. If I come in, they will batter down the door before you finish the ritual, Kaelin said, his eyes wild. He looked down the hallway. A massive wave of darkness was rolling toward them, chittering and shrieking. I have to hold the line. You'll die, Valerius sobbed, the tears freezing on his cheeks. Please, Kaelin. I can't. Kaelin framed Valerius's face with his blood-stained hands. He kissed him, hard and fast. I am the Obsidian Wolf. I do not die easy. Now go. He shoved Valerius into the chamber and slammed the heavy iron doors. He heard the magical locks engage, sealing the prince inside. Kaelin turned to face the horde. He was alone. He was tired, and he had never felt more alive. Come on then, he roared, his voice shaking the stone pillars. Come and break yourselves against me. The battle that followed was the stuff of legend. For 20 minutes, Kaelin Varric held the hallway against the abyss. He fought until his sword shattered. He fought with a stolen spear. He fought with his fists and his teeth. He took wounds that should have killed a dozen men, but he refused to fall. He had to buy time. Every second he bled was a second Valerius lived. Finally, a blinding pulse of blue light exploded from behind the iron doors. The shockwave swept through the hallway, vaporizing the shadow beasts, turning them into ash. The wards were back. The north was safe. The doors creaked open. Valerius stumbled out, glowing with renewed power, his eyes searching frantically. Cailan. He found him slumped against a pile of dissolved monster corpses, his armor shredded, his chest a ruin of claws marks. The pool of blood beneath him was terrifyingly large. No, no, no. Valerius dropped to his knees, disregarding the filth, pulling Cailan into his lap. Stay with me. Stay with me, damn you. Cailan's eyes fluttered open. They were hazy, unfocused. He coughed, blood bubbling over his lips. Did it work? It worked. Valerius wept, pressing his hands over Cailan's heart, pouring every ounce of magic he had into the wound. You saved us. You saved me. Cold, Cailan murmured, his head lolling back. I'm here, Valerius whispered, his voice breaking. I'm here. Valerius did something then that was forbidden. He didn't just use ice magic. He reached into the forbidden blood magic of his ancestors. He bit his own wrist, and then pressed it to Cailan's mouth. Drink, Valerius commanded, his eyes glowing with a terrifying power. My life for yours. My blood for yours. We are bound now, Wolf. I forbid you to die. Cailan woke to the smell of winter pines and the feeling of silk against his skin. He tried to sit up, but groaned as pain flared through his chest. Easy, a voice soothed. Valerius was there, sitting on the edge of the bed. But this wasn't the Onyx Tower. This was the royal bedchamber. Cailan looked down at his chest. The wounds were sealed, replaced by silvery scars that seemed to shimmer in the light. He looked at Valerius. The prince looked different. The constant aura of freezing cold was gone. His skin was flushed with a healthy color. What did you do? Cailan rasped. I rewrote the contract of the Frostline, Valerius said softly, taking Cailan's hand. I shared my lifeline with you. The curse no longer feeds only on me. It feeds on us both. Your fire balances my ice. As long as you live, I live. And as long as I live, you cannot die. Cailan stared at him, processing the magnitude of the sacrifice. It was a marriage of souls, deeper than any ring or vow. You foolish, arrogant prince, Cailan smiled, squeezing his hand. You're stuck with me forever now. There is no one else I would rather be stuck with. Valerius leaned down, brushing his lips against Cailan's forehead. The High Chancellor has been executed. Your brother has been sent an ultimatum. Peace, or the combined wrath of the North and the wolf he betrayed. And the court? Cailan asked. Will they accept the southern savage in the king's bed? Valerius straightened, the imperious glint returning to his eyes, though his hand remained tenderly intertwined with Cailan's. Let them whisper, Valerius said. Let them look. They will see that the wolf has not been tamed. He has merely found his pack. Cailan pulled Valerius down onto the bed, wrapping his arms around the man who had once been his enemy, the man who was now his soul. Then let them look, Cailan whispered against his lips. And let them tremble. And that is how the wolf of the south finally melted the heart of the Winter Prince. If you felt the heat between these two enemies, crush that like button. And tell me in the comments, can true love ever be born from hatred, or is it just obsession in disguise? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then,